He became a Bevan boy during the war, and I see a few heads nodding, but at that time you had a choice, or well, you didn't have a choice, you either there was a ballot, you either went into the army or you went down the pits, and my dad went down the pits as one of the Bevan boys, and that's where my dad stayed until he had an accident and was invalided out of the mines. But I was one of 7. My dad was very involved in politics. He was a member of the Labour Party in Cowdenbeath, and I can remember when I was 11, which was 1964, so you can work out I was 60 in November. When I was 11, my dad let me stay up to watch Harold Wilson win the 1964 general election. And of course it had been quite a while since the Labour Party had been in office or been in government. And I can always remember how touched my dad was, and how emotional my dad was, and what it meant to him to have a Labour government. And from 1964 until the present day, I have never missed an election night, either on television or in latter years being part of election nights myself. So I was brought up in a very political household. We talked about politics all the time. I grew up, I didn't go to university. I started to work when I was 16, and I got married at 22. I joined SNP in 1985 and broke my father's heart. My father was absolutely desperate for me to join the Labour Party, and I didn't. So I joined SNP in 1985. My sister Alice was already an SNP councillor in Inverkeithing at that point, and my dad so much wanted me to join the Labour Party, and I just couldn't. So Alice stood against Gordon Brown, of all people, in Cowdenbeath in 1987, I think it was, when either 83 or 87 when Gordon first stood in the constituency, and of course my dad was a member of the constituency Labour Party. He refused point blank to let my mother put up any posters in the house in Cowdenbeath for her own daughter. So I think that explains, something about how rabid my father was. So when I joined the SNP in 1985, I was just reflecting about, how times changed, because I phoned up Alice and I'd said, Alice, I think I want to join the SNP, and she said to me, well, just go along to one of their meetings. And I said, but I don't know anybody. She said, oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. So she told me the date, she told me the time, and she told me the place, so I went in there. And I went in, and it was all men. And they looked like, they were so shocked. It was as if I had parachuted in from Mars. And they barely spoke to me. And I went back and I said to Alice, Alice, that's it, I'm not going back, so you've got to. So I did go back, and there were more women, very few, I made very, very good friends. But what became clear to me in the early days was that the SNP in that area was quite moribund. I think people enjoyed being the chair, the secretary, the treasurer. They didn't actually enjoy doing very much work. So when somebody like me came along and I made a friend or two, we decided we'd just take it by the scruff of the neck. And what I've found, ladies, as you've found in your life, I'm quite sure, is that we do work harder than the men, because we've got to. We've got so much more to prove. And I think, they're quite happy, to let us do these things now and again. In 1992, I was asked if I would stand for the seat of Westminster in the general election that was being held there. And I wasn't very keen, and I also didn't think that was good enough. So I was persuaded to go on one of what we call election weekends in the SNP, where you get vetted to see if you're suitable. And you go through all these exercises of public speaking and political awareness. And on the night before I was due to go, I took cold feet. And I said, no, I can't possibly go, I'm just simply not good enough. And my very, very good friend Ken McCaskill phoned up and said, Tricia, you've absolutely got to go. So you can blame all on Ken McCaskill, as he gets a blame for so many things these days. So I did go, within about an hour of being, at the meeting, how we all self-assess. And I realised that there's probably about a quarter of the room better than me. I was as good as the next quarter, and half of them were just absolute rubbish. So I knew in my heart that there was absolutely no way I was going to fail, because the SNP were so desperate for candidates in 1992, they were not going to, they were certainly not going to fail half a course. So I got through. Of course I didn't get elected, and then in 1999 I stood for the Scottish Parliament, was elected on the regional list, the PR part of it, and it was such a thrill, and it was such an honour to be not only one of the first women, because the previous Scottish Parliament up to 1707 never had any women at all in it. Secondly, to be elected, because the previous Scottish Parliament never had any elections. So it was a great thrill in 1999. And the only thing that I did regret in 1999 was that my mum and dad had passed away by then. So neither of them got to see it. But if I could just do a wee detour to tell this funny story about my dad, well, I thought it was a funny story anyway. My dad went to live in Edinburgh, where my sister was a councillor, and he had left the Labour Party some years before, or as he used to put it, the Labour Party left him. But he always voted Labour, so we went down to live in Edinburgh, where my sister was a councillor, and we were coming up to her election, and my dad said to Alice, he said, I'm going to vote for you this time. Now that was a huge thing. Unfortunately my dad took ill, and my dad died at the beginning of Alice's election campaign. And I can remember as we were going back in the car, Alice said, that old bugger. Not only did he go away and die, he had to make it the first week of my election campaign, and I can't get out canvassing until after his funeral. So it cost her a week of her election campaign and then never voted for her at all. So he went to his grave never ever having voted anything but Labour. But he would have been really, really proud of me in being elected to the Scottish Parliament. I mean, it's always said, in 1999, it was a bit, again, like when I first joined at the SNP. The harder you work, the better it is. And although I do like the politics, I love the politics, I thought that part of my role was to help build the institution. And I think if you look at the things I've done in the Scottish Parliament, it was the Business Bureau, which sets all working with other parties and setting the agenda for the Parliament. And then in 2007, I was on the Scottish Parliament Corporate Body, which is like a board of directors, and it's responsible for looking after the Parliament, the buildings, all of that. So in 2007, when I was re-elected as the SNP MSP for Mid-Fife and Glenrothes constituency, we were looking for a new presiding officer. And I was going to run as deputy because I thought, I've served my time, I'll run as a deputy presiding officer. But that weekend I looked at some of the names that were getting floated about, obviously by themselves, because that's how politics works. I saw some of the names that had been floated to the press as potential presiding officers, and I looked to them as I'd done many years before, and I thought, I'm better than them. I could do that. So I stood for presiding officer and was duly elected. And it's a thrill to be the first woman presiding officer. There's been 3 men before me, but I think, we will not be happy until the fact that we can elect a woman presiding officer and there is no comment about it. And I can remember when Alex Salmond was being elected as the First Minister, because we've got to go through an election process, and I was chairing that proceedings, so he started off by calling me Madam Presiding Officer, and then everybody else followed suit. Ian Gray, Ruth Davidson. Suddenly we get this Madam Presiding Officer, and I thought, no, I'm not having that. So it'd be very, I want to start the way I mean to go on. I am Presiding Officer. I am not Madam Presiding Officer. I am Presiding Officer, and that's the way it's been. We're not going to, certainly when Betty Boothroyd became the first speaker and the only speaker today at Westminster, it seems such a long time ago that she became the speaker, and it's about time we had another female. Anyway, Betty famously said, "Just call me Madam." So to paraphrase, please don't call me Madam, just the Presiding Officer. So it's been an absolute roller coaster, but it's been the most thrilling experience being the Presiding Officer. It is extremely difficult at the moment. It's extremely tense. The constitutional debate gets into every single debate. Tensions are a bit high. It's my job to try to keep them calm as far as possible. But I suspect we are going to have more of the same, until after the referendum is over. The only other thing that I really wanted to mention is that, last year I became really quite ill. In January last year, I had an operation to remove my gallbladder. So that was not pleasant, but I got over that. And then in April, I was ill again. And I was back and forward with the doctor, and he kept saying, it's just the gallbladder, it needs to settle down, just keep taking these tablets, and give me different tablets. And I finally went to him and I said, look, there's something really not quite right here. So he sent me to the consultant and discovered that I had a bowel tumour. So I had cancer last year. I had an operation in June. I was off for a month, and luckily we went into recess. So I had the most wonderful summer recuperating in my back garden with my grandkids. Had chemotherapy and continued to have chemotherapy when I went back in September. And then when I had scans that showed I was clear, it was only at that point that I told anybody. Because what I didn't want anybody to do was to hold back, take it easy on me, and I just wanted to continue as we were. So I'm well. I had more scans again in January. All the scans are clear. I think the next ones are May. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster of a ride. But I think probably with what my story, if it's a story at all, is that you can suffer hardship. I came from a very, very poor background and became the presiding officer of the Scottish Parliament. And many people sort of look at that and say, oh, you're a woman. It's much more than just being the first woman presiding officer. I'm the first presiding officer who didn't go to a private school. I'm the first presiding officer who came from a working class background. And I am the first presiding officer who didn't go to university. So being a woman is important to me. But the whole of my story, the whole of my journey is important too. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tricia. That was truly inspirational and just shows what women can achieve with hard work and determination. Thank you very much for that. Now for something completely different. I've known Mary Leach for many years. Mary was one of the judges at the first Rotary Young Musician competition. She's a singing teacher at George Watson's College. Her father-in-law was a member of a Rotary Club of Merrifield Cramond, and she's generously provided the entertainment at many a Rotary event. Mary is here today with her husband, Robin, and she's now going to sing for us. So over to you, Mary.
Well, it's lovely to be here. I'm clutching my tea because I always like to have a hot drink for my throat in the mornings, particularly. It's quite early to sing, but I'll give it a go. So I'm going to sing 3 women-related songs. The first one is Vilia from The Merry Widow, which is very well known. The second one is Voi che sapete, Tell Me Fair Ladies from The Marriage of Figaro, which I think, again, a lot of you recognise. And then I'm going to finish with a very favourite Burns song, which many of you have heard me sing many times. It's A Fond Kiss. So hopefully a bit of variety there. So I'll go over to the keyboard and get myself sorted. Thank you very much. Photocopied it to make it easier to turn the pages.